Good morning, living environment. Today we're going to continue with evolution. If you open up your agenda for today, it's titled Evidence for Evolution. Today's aim is what is the evidence for evolution? Today's do now, you're going to copy the vocabulary words from the lesson video. All right, so once we start the lesson, you're going to copy the two vocab words into your guided notes. All right, the goal for today's lesson is to define evolution, adaptation, embryology, and we're going to speak about biotechnology. Also, in addition, we're going to explore and identify the evidence for Darwin has for evolution. All right, if you take a look at today's agenda, you're going to complete the do now in the guided notes. You're going to watch the lesson video, which is this video. And then last but not least, you got to complete the guided notes and click the turn-in button. Okay, you could go right ahead and open up your guided notes. Okay, so once again, today's aim or focus is as follows. What is the evidence for evolution? So we introduced evolution, all right? We suggested a theory of evolution, and now today we're going to list the evidence that supports that theory. All right, for the do now, I would like everybody to copy down the vocabulary words. Evolution is the process of change in species over time, thousands of years. This does not happen quickly or it does not happen overnight. All right. And what that says is present day species. So, what you observe today, the animals or the present day species you observe today developed from earlier, distinctly different species. All right. And then once again, as a recap, a species is a distinct type of organism that can reproduce successfully. All right. For example, canines, dogs is a example of a species. So go ahead and press pause of this video, and I want you to copy the two vocab words where it says do now in your guided notes. Okay, so there are four forms of evolutionary evidence. Number one, fossil records. Number two, comparative biochemistry. Number three, comparative anatomy. And number four, comparative embryology. So you're going to copy those four forms of evolutionary evidence in your guided notes where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can press pause. Okay, so after you have copied the four forms of evolutionary evidence, let's take a look at each one specifically. All right. So number one, fossil records. Okay. All right. Fossils are defined as preserved remains of organisms. You're gonna copy what's underlined in your guided notes. All right. So underneath fossil records, all right, you're gonna hit enter, and you're gonna copy down preserved remains of organisms. All right, so when we look at fossil records, we, or scientists, are or have observed certain traits. All right, we know that organisms have changed over time, all right, now over thousands of years, by looking at or studying vestigial traits present in fossils. So, a vestigial trait, very important, feature or a vocab word that leads to the fossil record evidence. All right, a vestigial trait is a trait that an organism has, but it's no longer necessary for survival. Okay, so what does that mean? For example, if you take a look at whales, present day whales, if you look closely at their anatomy, whales have pelvic bones, all right? But doesn't, if you know, why would a whale have a pelvic bone, all right? Whales are not land mammals, right? They're aquatic, all right? The pelvic bone supports an mammal or an animal to walk, all right? Whales don't walk, they're aquatic, they swim. So it is evidence suggests that according to the fossil records that um, there was once a time where whales were land mammals. All right, they walked. All right, another example is wisdom teeth in humans. All right, uh, it is no longer necessary or required for humans to have wisdom teeth. So why do they exist? All right, and the reasoning behind that is that wisdom teeth were present thousands of years ago for humans to help them break down or chew certain hard or difficult um, food. All right. So before, when humans, before we were in towns or before we had crops and before we were civilized, right? We lived in probably just in small tribes, right? More in the wild. And, we humans were probably eating pretty much anything they found or anything they came across in the you know in the woods or wherever they had their habitat, right? So probably they chewed on some certain bark, right? That was provided nutrients, but it was definitely hard, right? So the wisdom teeth in humans help them break down certain food. All right, so you take a look at this diagram. I want you to brainstorm about this question. All right, where do you think the oldest fossils are located? All right, and if you take a look at the diagram, as you start from the bottom and as you go to the top, time is increasing. And if you said the oldest fossils are located at the bottom, you are correct. All right. If you take Earth Science next year, you will go into more detail about this. But over time, sediment falls, right, or more fossils fall, and it provides a layer. So as time increases, fossils are newer. All right. So if you wanted to find the oldest possible fossil, you would have to dig as deep um as possible or as deep as you can, right? So as you go deeper into the Earth's surface, fossils are become older. All right, so press pause. I would like you to everybody copy down the definition from the lesson into your guided notes on vestigial traits. Okay, second piece of evidence that supports evolution is comparative anatomy. Comparative anatomy is defined as the study of similarities in physical features, or we also call that homologous structures. So in your guided notes, go ahead and Well, I check that. I take that back. You do not have to write that down because that definition is already in your guided notes. So, comparative anatomy. What is comparative anatomy? All right. Scientists study comparative anatomy or homologous structures. All right. Homologous structures means, all right, now this is a new vocabulary. Structures that are similar due to a common ancestor. All right. So let me repeat that. Homologous structures are structures that are similar due to a common ancestor. Organisms with more structural similarities are believed or said to be more closely related. All right. The structures do not need to have the same function, but if they look the same, more or less, it's said that these structures are closely related or came from a common ancestor. All right, so in your guided notes, you are going to copy that down. Similarities are believed. Structures that are similar due to a common ancestor. So you could press pause and you could fill in your guided notes now. Okay, so after you complete your guided notes, let's do a quick think, pair, share. All right, so take a look at these diagrams. Based on the evolutionary evidence presented, which organisms are more closely related? All right, and according to this, according to comparative anatomy, if you take a look at the human and the cat, right? This is the human arm. This is the cat arm. All right. Um, they don't have the same. Well, yeah, I guess you could say they do. They do have a very similar function in this case, and they look the same, right? Kind of could see that the human has um, 5 fingers, right? Phalanges, we call them, and the cat also has a resemblance of fingers or phalanges. Okay. If you take a look at the butterfly and the bat, all right, similar um, function, right? Both part of a wing of a butterfly and a bat, and they also have very similar anatomical features, right? You could kind of see like the structures in the butterfly wing and also in the bat. So we could say that these comparative anatomy supports that the human and the cat or the butterfly and the bat came from a common ancestor because they have homologous structures. All right, so moving on. Third piece of evidence is titled comparative biochemistry. Comparative biochemistry is the study of similarities in DNA and proteins. So, comparative biochemistry states more similarities in DNA and proteins leads to more closely related. All right. There's a process that scientists utilize or use called gel electrophoresis. It can be used to identify similarities in DNA. So I would like everybody to take this opportunity to go back to their guided notes and copy what's underlined. So more similarities in DNA and proteins leads to more closely related. All right, and then that process is called gel electrophoresis, can be used to identify similarities in DNA. So go ahead and copy that now. Okay, so getting back to the lesson, let's take a look at the first example of or what gel electrophoresis looks like. So what we have here, we have a plant. Let's call it plant X. All right, we don't know the name or the identity of this plant. All right, so we're using the letter X to represent it. All right, and if it works in columns. All right, so plant X, this is the DNA strands. All right, or we call them DNA bands. All right, then we have kind of let's think of it as guessed or culprits of what this plant could be. So we have plant 1, plant 2, plant 3. All right, whichever plant 1, 2, 3, is closely related or has similar DNA bands to plant X, that is most likely what plant X is. So let's take a look. So plant X, all right. Is plant 1 similar to plant X? All right. Are the DNA bands closely next to or related? We're gonna have to say no, right? Because look at plant 1. All right, the first DNA band's up here. The first DNA for plant X is down here. So X out plant 1. Let's look at plant 2. Is plant 2 closely related to plant X according to your DNA bands? First one's over here. Second one is over here, right? So we're comparing this and this to this and that. Is it close? Yes. But I'm not convinced that plant 2 is plant X. Now let's look at plant 3. All right. Take a look at this DNA band. All right. It is close to the first DNA of plant X. Okay. If you take a look at the second one over here, it's close. And then the last two, right, is over here, right? So plant 3 DNA bands are closely related to plant X. All right, so you were right. Plant 3 is most closely related to plant X because they have similar DNA bands. Okay, in the guided notes, they're giving us two options. They want us to identify two plants that are similar. So plant 3 is definitely similar, and if you had to select another one, you would say plant 2, right? Plant 2 is similar to plant X, and then plant 1 is definitely not, right? The bands are not next to plant X's DNA bands. All right, so just to wrap it up, definitely plant 3, okay? And then if you had to put another option or another suspect, so to say, you could say plant 2. All right. All right, let's take a look at another way. Comparative biochemistry looks like not only do they use DNA bands, but they also use sequence of amino acids. All right, so for my forensic science students out there, you definitely have we definitely spoke about this. I know you guys did this with Miss Mason in forensic science. They use this all the time in crime scenes when there's DNA left behind at a crime scene and they're trying to identify the suspect, so to say. All right. This is the process, more or less, what they use. All right. So we have species, right? We have human, horse, gorilla, chimpanzee, and zebra. And then for each species, we have the sequence of amino acids of some part of the hemoglobin or the red blood cells of those molecules. All right. So questions asking which two organisms are most closely related based on their protein sequence. So, which two organisms have a similar or pretty close to exactly the same amino acids? So let's take a first look at human and horse. All right. So if you take a look at humans and horse, all right, first one for humans is Lys. Second one, first one for horses, ARG. And if you go down the line, you can quickly tell this amino acid sequence is not similar to a horse. All right, let's move on. The gorilla. If you take a look at the human amino acid sequence, and if you take a look at the gorilla, right, LYS matches up, LYS, GLU, GLU, HIS, HIS. So almost exactly the same until you get to the last one, right? The last amino acid for humans is ISO, and the gorilla is LYS. So in your guided notes, we identified the two most closely related species based on protein sequence, the human and the gorilla. Okay, let's move on. Let's check to see if there's a better answer or maybe some other species that's closely related to humans. Let's take a look at the chimpanzee. LYS, LYS, GLU, GLU, HIS, HIS, and ISO and ISO. So there is actually a better answer. You can leave gorilla, but I would like you to add also humans and chimpanzees have a very, very similar sequence of amino acid. So you could put humans plus gorillas plus chimpanzees, or if you want to just put human and chimpanzees, that's fine. All right, so you go ahead and do that in your guided notes. All right, moving on, because I don't want this video to drag out and being too long. We're already at 22 minutes, so let's move on. All right, so last piece of evidence that scientists use to support evolution is number 4, comparative embryology. Comparative embryology is the study of similarities in embryos and early development. All right, so what that states is, or what that means is, closely related species have similar embryos that are difficult to tell apart during early development. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at this diagram. All right, each row, so row 1, row 2, row 3, that identifies a specific species. So row 1 is a fish. Row 3 is a turtle. Row 4 is a chicken, etc., etc. So if you take a look at the early stages of embryology or the development of an embryo, a fish, right? So the early stages is this row, okay? And then as you go down development, or the species is ready to be born, right? So take a look at number 1, and let's compare number 1 to a chicken, all right? Number 1 to number 4. You could hardly tell the difference between what a embryo of a fish compared to a chicken looks like. Very similar. You could even say that early stages of a chicken, right? Number 4 compared to number 8, okay, look very similar to human, right? Number 4 is a chicken. Number 8 is a human. Very similar. So this supports that we all, or all of the species listed here, come from a common ancestor. All right. So what are the similarities between the embryos? All right. In your guided notes, I would like you to write what's underlined. All of the embryos in the diagram have, so in early stages, all right, in that first row, over here, all of the embryos have these similarities. They all have tails, they all have gills, and they all have an early spine. Yes, chickens, in the beginning of development, chickens and pigs have gills. So you're going to jot that down where you have the 3 bullet points and the space. All right, so let's wrap it up. All right, so for the summary, you guys are going to answer this as your exit ticket. All right, in your guided notes. I want everybody to make their own prediction. You can, based on the 4 evidence that we just discussed, do you think one type of evidence is more reliable than another? All right, or should we look at all the evidence together before making conclusions? Support your answer. All right, so I want you to read that question prompt. I want you to answer that question thoroughly. All right, it might take more than 2 sentences. It might take up to 4 or 5 sentences. All right, and I want you to put some thought into that. All right. There's no right or wrong answer. It's an opinion-based question, but just be prepared to back up your response. All right. Also, there's a YouTube video that I'm going to post under the Google assignments that you could watch. All right. So you might want to watch that before you answer this question. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, stay well, stay safe, keep washing those hands, and happy Thursday.